We look at the impact that this judgment will have on the real estate industry over the next 5 years. I think the first thing that we've got to do is we've got to separate the industry between what I call verdict brokers. That's the people that the verdict was levied upon, and settlement brokers, the brokers that settled in advance of the verdict. And so obviously the settlement brokers, their liability has been defined. And in hindsight, when they made the settlement, I think there was a lot of people that questioned, hey, is that wise? In hindsight, they look very wise. And so their liability is defined. Let's have a look at the verdict brokers, the people that are covered by the verdict. There's a number of things that become an issue for verdict brokers. One is that the verdict brokers obviously have a financial liability, and that liability, that financial liability, may have an impact, a tremendous impact on them relative to their ability to continue to operate. But what do I mean by that? If you look at the verdict, a lot of people don't realize that it's when you have an antitrust verdict, the verdict is trebled or tripled. So the judgment in the verdict is close to $6 billion. And when you look at the industry, there isn't $6 billion in cash in the entire industry, never mind in the named parties. So if you look at NAR and Keller Williams and Home Services of America, that could be a business ending judgment for them. And that's a very, very significant impact. So I think when we look at the brokerages or the franchisors or the named people in the verdict, very significant. In terms of the industry as a whole, I frankly don't see it having a huge impact on the industry. And here's why. The industry is always driven by the market. And we've talked about how, in the market, buyers want to be represented. When buyers purchase a piece of real estate, they traditionally haven't purchased a piece of real estate for 5, 6, 7 years. They haven't done a transaction in a long time. So they don't have time to become experts at it. It's a huge investment. It's usually the biggest investment they ever make. So, I'm not an expert at the transaction. It's the biggest investment I'm ever going to make in my life. I want representation. The second factor in the market is the buyer typically can't afford to pay for the representation. And so, it's always been part of the sale price. It's been baked into the sale price, if you will, relative to how the buyer gets paid. Let's look at the seller for a sec. What does the seller want? Well, the seller wants the most money for their house. And in order for them to get the most money for their house, it has to be exposed to the most buyers. They're not in a place where they want to say, well, I'm going to exclude that buyer because they can't afford to pay a commission. They want to say, hey, everybody, come on down. And so however the industry does it, the industry is going to create a system where the buyer's represented, the buyer can easily have their commission paid, and the seller can have access to all of those buyers that they want to get the most money for their home. It's interesting. I saw an article written by a major bank, and the bank said, hey, we're toying around with a product where if the buyer is our borrower, we'll fund the commission, the buyer brokerage commission, as part of the mortgage. And so all of these ideas, however they filter out, will mean that the industry, the impact on the industry is minimal. One of the things that I've seen is pundits saying, and I always say bad news sells, saying, hey, the end of buyer brokerage is here, or the end of compensation for buyer brokerage is here. The reason that I don't believe that to be true is that real estate, everybody thinks that there is a tremendous amount of excess profit in real estate. It's the funniest business from that perspective. Everybody in the value chain thinks the person above them is getting rich, right? They think, okay, the seller thinks, oh my God, the agent's getting rich. The agent thinks, oh my gosh, the broker's getting rich, right? And nobody's getting rich. Now, the people that are good make a good living, and if you look at the business, whether at the brokerage level or at the agent level, it's the 80-20 rule really on steroids. It's probably 90-10 or 95-5. A very few people do really well, and most people don't do well. There isn't excess profit, and for a bunch of reasons. The primary reason is that it's a variable commission model. The seller says, hey, I only want to pay if I sell. I don't want to pay a flat fee. I don't want to pay an hourly fee like I pay my attorney or CPA. The seller says, look, I want to pay variably. The buyer says, look, I don't want to pay at all. I just want to, have my agent looked after somehow if I find a house. And so that variable commission model means that there isn't excess profit. Nobody's getting rich in the real estate business. We don't have realtors in the United States or Canada flying around in private jets and with mega yachts. We have people making a good living. And so buyers and sellers will dictate the market in terms of the services that they want. And there is no excess profit to drive fees down. And the last thing, I think the last piece of impact is really important, and that is copycat lawsuits. And again, if I look at non-settlement brokers, if you're outside of the settlement that was made, you see already copycat lawsuits popping up. Really what the lawsuit did is it provided a business model, a template for any contingency attorney to go out and sue a real estate broker. And so I've already seen copycat lawsuits where smaller brokerages are named in a lawsuit. I've seen teams named in lawsuit. There was one that just came out in Texas that has a number of teams in it. Small MLSs. They all have liability relative to copycat lawsuits now that a template has been forged from Sitzer Burnett. The way that I would prepare agents for the future of what the industry will look like, and frankly, how we're coaching all of our members here at Inner Circle Broker Coaching. First of all, the industry is going to become much more transparent, which I think is fantastic for everyone involved, for the professional realtor, for the professional agents, for the professional brokers, and of course, for the buyers and sellers. What do I mean by transparency? We need to be transparent with people about how commission works. What's the value of it? That they have an option about whether to opt for that payment or not. And if they do decide to opt for it, what is the benefit of it? And we've got to provide coaching and training for our agents to have those kinds of conversations, to have conversations with buyers about how a buyer brokerage agreement works, about how buyer brokerage commission works, about how much I would charge, about the benefits of what you get from my fee as a buyer broker. We will want to have things like testimonials of people who've already used their services or used the services of our brokerage. It's interesting. One of the things I think that from a buyer brokerage perspective, I was speaking with one of our clients and they have a one-stop shopping model and they have a guarantee. And the guarantee is the same day closing guarantee. So if a buyer or seller uses the mortgage, title, and real estate services, they guarantee everything closes the same day. What a benefit. We've got to be able to describe those kinds of benefits to buyers, your experience, how you negotiate, what you're going to do, how you're going to find them a home, right? And so what we're coaching our members at Inner Circle Broker Coaching to do is coach their agents on those kinds of things. In fact, a number of our members have hosted those kinds of coaching events and invited competitors and had a tremendous turnout from our competitors' agents. And so if you're a broker watching this, make sure you're coaching and training your agents before your competitors do. It's the number one thing that we can do to defend against future liability in these kinds of situations.